I walked into the morning meeting with my usual confident smile, expecting updates on the quarter's progress. The conference room was packed with executives I rarely saw in one place. Something felt off. The air was thick with tension, and no one would meet my eyes. My manager, Chris, stood up with a cold smirk I'd never seen before. His voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Leila, your employment is terminated. Effective immediately.
No explanation.
No severance discussion. No thank you for 5 years of dedicated service." The words hit me like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask why, to defend myself. But Chris raised his hand, silencing me before I could utter a single word. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to say this was a mistake. The CFO stared at his laptop screen. The VP of operations suddenly found her coffee cup fascinating. Even Janet from HR, who used to chat with me about her kids, avoided my gaze. No one said anything. No one defended me. The silence stretched on forever. Security appeared within minutes, as if they'd been waiting outside the door. 2 uniformed guards flanked me as we walked through the open office floor. Every head turned to watch my walk of shame. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Keyboards fell silent. At my desk, one guard stood behind me while the other watched. "Take only personal items," the first one said. "No company property." My hand shook as I reached for the framed photo of my mother. She'd raised me alone, teaching me to never give up when things got tough. I clutched the frame to my chest, fighting back tears. The junior analysts I'd mentored for months pretended to be busy. Not one person said goodbye or asked what happened. The office that had been my second home for 5 years suddenly felt like enemy territory. As I packed my small box of belongings, Rose, a shy intern from accounting, rushed past my desk. She quickly shoved something into my coat pocket, then disappeared before I could react. In the parking lot, sitting in my car, I finally let the tears come. My whole world had just collapsed, and I didn't even know why. Sleep was impossible that night. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall, replaying the morning over and over. The food I'd ordered remained untouched on the coffee table. My appetite had vanished along with my job. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Sarah, a friend from the accounting department. Her voice was hushed, like she was afraid someone might overhear. "Leila, I'm so sorry about what happened. But you need to know something. Chris has been telling everyone you were too emotional and careless with important reports. He's already taking credit for the Q2 safety rollout." "Your rollout?" My jaw clenched. The Q2 rollout had been my baby for 6 months. I'd worked nights and weekends to make it perfect. "There's more," Sarah whispered. "He's been saying you made critical errors in compliance reports. But Leila, I've seen your work. You never make mistakes like that." After she hung up, I remembered something. I had backups of everything. Every document, every email, every signed approval, including one that Chris had forged with my electronic signature. A detail he didn't know I'd noticed at the time. I opened my laptop and accessed my personal archive. Years of careful documentation stared back at me. As I scrolled through files, one folder caught my attention. Internal_compliance_V2. My blood ran cold as I opened it. Inside were altered safety reports with my name on them, tax disclosures with missing information, unapproved executive bonuses, and worst of all, multiple falsified compliance documents bearing my electronic signature. But I'd never signed these versions. Someone had taken my legitimate reports and changed them. The original dates didn't match my calendar. The language was different from my writing style. Yet my signature was digitally attached to each one. A chill ran down my spine as the truth hit me. This wasn't just about firing me. This was a cover-up, and I was supposed to be the fall guy. Chris had been setting me up for months, maybe longer. My hands trembled as I saved copies of everything to multiple locations. If Chris thought he could destroy my reputation and get away with fraud, he was dead wrong. I remembered someone who might know more about Chris's schemes. Someone he'd silenced months ago. I called James, a former team leader who'd been quietly let go 6 months earlier. His number was still in my phone, though we hadn't spoken since his departure. "Leila." His voice was cautious when he answered. "I heard what happened."
I'm sorry.
James, I need to ask you something. Why were you really fired? There was a long pause. Then his voice became steady, almost relieved. Chris has been forging approvals for over a year. He pushed our whole team to skip compliance steps to meet impossible deadlines. Anyone who resisted or asked questions got written up for performance issues. My heart pounded. Did you keep any evidence? Some. But Leila, he didn't just fire you because you were good at your job. He fired you because he knew you were getting close to discovering what he's been doing. You were asking too many questions about the compliance reports. After we hung up, I remembered the item Rose had slipped into my pocket. I pulled out a small flash drive with a note. You'll need this. With shaking hands, I plugged it into my laptop. The flash drive was a goldmine. Internal chat logs, email screenshots, and most damning of all, a screen recording of a Zoom meeting I hadn't been invited to. I watched in horror as Chris laughed with two other managers. Just reuse Leila's report format, he said casually. Change the dates, add my signature, and send it off. The regulators never actually read these things anyway. I watched the video twice, my anger building with each viewing. My name, my template, my reputation being used to cover up his fraud. The report they were discussing had been sent to a federal safety agency. If anyone got hurt because of those false reports, I would be held responsible. But now I had proof. Clear, undeniable evidence of Chris's criminal behavior. My phone buzzed with an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "Are you free to talk about opportunities?" I stared at the screen, wondering if this was another setup. After everything that had happened, I didn't know who to trust anymore. But something told me to open it. The email was from Harrison and Associates, a reputable consulting firm across town. They'd heard rumors about my situation and wanted to meet, but the last paragraph made my heart race. If you've witnessed any unethical or illegal behavior at your previous employer, we have full legal protection resources available for whistleblowers. Your safety and career are our priority. I stared at the message for 10 minutes. Was this fate, or was someone watching me? Had word already spread about Chris's schemes? I looked at my evidence folder. The altered reports. The forged signatures. The video confession. James's testimony about the culture of fraud. This wasn't just about my job anymore. People's lives could be at risk because of those falsified safety reports. I had a responsibility to speak up. I started building a comprehensive case file. Quiet, focused, and deadly serious. Chris had made one crucial mistake when he fired me. He'd forgotten that good employees keep meticulous records. And I was very good at my job. I needed air and real food. After 2 days of hiding in my apartment, I dressed in a simple outfit and walked to a small cafe downtown. I was stirring my coffee when I spotted a familiar face across the room. Brianna, a former analyst from my department. She'd been quietly let go 4 months ago for performance issues. Our eyes met and she walked over. Leila, I heard. I'm so sorry. What really happened to you? I asked as she sat down. Brianna's expression darkened. Chris built a fake performance narrative around me over 3 months. He documented every minor mistake, exaggerated every deadline, and ignored all my successes. When I tried to push back, he said I was being defensive and unprofessional. She pulled out her phone. I still have the emails. And the HR communications. Want to see something interesting? She showed me a forwarded email thread that made my blood boil. Chris had been planning my dismissal for weeks, feeding lies to HR about my declining performance and attitude problems. We need to meet tomorrow, I said quietly. I have something to show you too. The next morning, Brianna and I sat in a different cafe with laptops and coffee. She showed me the complete email thread that had sealed her fate. Chris had pushed lies to HR for weeks before her dismissal. When the HR representative hesitated, questioning the sudden change in Brianna's performance ratings, Chris had threatened to recommend a review of HR's effectiveness in managing problem employees. The HR rep had folded immediately. Just like that, Brianna was gone. And here's the kicker, Brianna said, scrolling to another email. He replaced me with someone he was rumored to be dating. A friend of his from college with no relevant experience. I showed her my evidence folder. The falsified reports, the video confession, the forged signatures. Her face went pale as she realized the scope of Chris's fraud. "This isn't just about wrongful termination," she whispered. "This is criminal conspiracy." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd researched the night before. A law firm that specialized in whistleblower protection and corporate fraud. "I think it's time we talk to professionals," I said. The lawyers at Morrison & Chun were exactly what I'd hoped for. Professional, thorough, and completely unfazed by the scope of Chris's crimes. "This isn't just unethical," Attorney Morrison said, reviewing my evidence folder. "This is federal fraud. Falsifying safety reports to government agencies is a serious crime. What you have here could trigger a federal investigation." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "But I need to ask you directly. Are you prepared for what comes next? This won't be quiet. There will be media attention, possible retaliation attempts, and a long legal process." I thought about my mother's photo on my desk, about all the employees Chris had bullied and fired, about the safety reports that could get people hurt or killed. I sipped my water slowly, then smiled with more confidence than I'd felt in days. I've been ready for this my whole career. I just didn't know it yet. That evening, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Chris was trending on social media. He'd been featured on an industry podcast. I watched the podcast with growing fury. Chris sat smugly in his home office, the picture of success and confidence. "Sometimes you have to make tough decisions about personnel," he said. "Competence doesn't always equal value to the organization. Some people get comfortable and stop growing." The interviewer nodded thoughtfully. "How do you identify when someone has reached their limit?" Chris leaned back in his chair. "When they start questioning legitimate business decisions. When they prioritize perfect compliance over practical results. When they can't adapt to a faster-paced environment." I watched the clip 3 times, my fists curling tighter each time. His arrogance was breathtaking. He was literally describing his own crimes as practical business decisions. But his arrogance would be his undoing. He was digging his own grave on a public platform. My phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Would you be interested in a reconciliation coffee meeting? To clear the air." Chris, I knew it was a setup, but I also knew it was an opportunity. I agreed to meet Chris at a neutral cafe, making sure to arrive early and choose a table near the window. Before he arrived, I activated a recording app on my phone and placed it discreetly on the table. Chris walked in wearing his expensive suit and fake smile. He controlled the conversation from the start, talking about misunderstandings and company restructuring needs. "Look, Leila, that whole termination thing wasn't personal. The company needed to move in a different direction." He stirred his coffee casually. "That quarterly safety report you were working on wasn't even that serious. You were just too rigid about following every little regulation." Click. Saved. "Sometimes you have to prioritize business results over bureaucratic perfectionism," he continued. "That's why you weren't promotable. Too focused on dotting every I and crossing every T." Everything he said was digging his grave deeper. He was admitting to cutting corners on safety regulations. On a recording. That night, I created a new file on my computer. I labeled it, "Do not open until 9 a.m. Monday." I spent the weekend cross-referencing everything. Screenshots of the altered reports, the original signed PDFs, the video confessions, the HR emails exposing the fake performance narrative, the hidden chat logs about skipping safety compliance. The complete evidence file was 117 megabytes of pure, documented truth. At 1:47 a.m. on Monday morning, I scheduled the file to auto-send to the company's board of directors, the federal safety regulators who'd received the falsified reports, and the major clients whose projects were affected by the compliance fraud. Send time, 9 a.m. sharp. I set multiple alarms, backup sending methods, and cloud storage copies. There would be no way to stop this once it started. For the first time in a week, I slept peacefully, and I smiled in my dreams. The truth was about to set me free. At 9:01 a.m., my phone started buzzing continuously. Calls, emails, text messages. The digital avalanche had begun. By 9:15, the company had scheduled an emergency board meeting. By 9:30, my inbox was flooded with interview requests from lawyers, journalists, and government investigators. Then came the anonymous text at 9:45. You just nuked us all. I hope you're happy. I was more than happy. I was victorious. At 10:20, Chris called me. I let it ring twice before answering. Leila. His voice was shaky, desperate. Please, you have to pull this back somehow. I'll give you full credit for everything. I'll fix your personnel file. I'll recommend you for any job you want. His voice cracked. I can't lose this job. It's all I have. My reputation, my career, everything. I listened to him beg for 30 seconds. Then I said the only words he deserved to hear. You should have thought about that before you destroyed mine. Click. I hung up and turned off my phone. By noon, Chris was suspended pending investigation. IT had already wiped his computer and confiscated his company devices. Security had escorted him from the building in the same humiliating way they'd escorted me. I watched the local news that evening. Anonymous whistleblower exposes widespread corporate fraud and safety cover-ups at major consulting firm, the anchor announced. My new lawyer called with updates. The federal investigators are very interested. This could be a landmark case for corporate accountability. Brianna texted me. I've been contacted to give testimony. Thank you for giving us all a voice. Rose, the brave intern who'd given me the flash drive, sent a message through LinkedIn. You saved us all. Thank you for your courage. For the first time in weeks I laughed. Really laughed. The avalanche was just getting started. Within a week, 3 HR staff members had resigned. The company's stock price dropped 15%. Federal investigators had opened a formal inquiry into the safety report falsifications. My new consulting firm privately congratulated me on standing up for integrity in the industry. They offered me a senior position with full legal protection and a substantial salary increase. You didn't just save your own career, my new boss said. You potentially saved hundreds of lives by exposing those falsified safety reports. Meanwhile, Chris's name was being scrubbed from company websites and marketing materials. His 5 years of accomplishments were being reinvestigated to determine what was real and what was fraudulent. The company that had humiliated me was now begging me to return. They offered a public apology, a promotion, and a 40% salary increase. I declined with a simple email. You didn't value my integrity when I worked quietly. You don't get to profit from it now that I've spoken loudly. 2 weeks after my evidence went public, Chris was officially terminated for cause. His stock options were revoked, his bonuses clawed back, and his professional licenses were under review. But it didn't stop there. The federal investigation had uncovered additional fraud in other departments. Chris's methods had spread like a cancer through the company culture. The board issued a public statement thanking a former employee whose integrity and courage exposed systemic problems that threatened public safety. Rose, the intern who'd risked her job to help me, was promoted to head of internal compliance, a newly created position with significant authority. Brianna was offered her old job back with a formal apology and back pay. She accepted, but with new protections in place for employees who report ethical concerns. The whole culture is changing, she told me over coffee. People aren't afraid to speak up anymore. I smiled, thinking about how one person's courage can transform an entire organization. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new corner office when my assistant knocked on the door. There's a group call for you, she said with a mysterious smile. I picked up the phone to hear cheering. It was the entire compliance department at my old company. Leila, we just wanted to thank you. Someone shouted over the celebration. The new safety protocols you recommended are being implemented company-wide. You saved our careers. You made it safe to do the right thing. I held the phone to my chest, tears of joy streaming down my face. This was better than any promotion or salary increase. I had helped create a workplace where integrity mattered more than politics. Later that evening, I updated my LinkedIn profile with a new title, Senior Director of Ethical Operations. The industry had taken notice. I was being invited to speak at conferences about corporate accountability and whistleblower protection. A year later, I was featured on the cover of Ethics in Business magazine. The headline read, The report that changed everything. How one employee's courage transformed corporate culture. In the interview, I talked about the importance of documentation, the courage to speak truth to power, and the responsibility we all have to protect public safety. Chris had been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for fraud and conspiracy. His name had become synonymous with corporate corruption in our industry. But for me, the real victory wasn't his downfall. It was the culture change. It was the young employees who now felt safe to report problems. It was the improved safety protocols that would protect countless people. I kept my mother's photo on my new desk, right next to a plaque that read, "Integrity is not for sale." She had taught me to never give up when things got tough. She would have been proud of what her lessons had accomplished. The company that fired me eventually went through a complete leadership overhaul. They implemented new ethics training, whistleblower protections, and transparency requirements. They asked me to consult on their cultural transformation. I agreed, but with conditions: full autonomy, public acknowledgement of past mistakes, and substantial donations to ethics education programs. During my first meeting with the new executive team, I sat in the same conference room where I'd been humiliated. But this time I was leading the conversation. Culture change starts with accountability, I told them. And accountability starts with admitting when you've failed your employees and your responsibilities. The new CEO nodded respectfully. That's why we need your help, to make sure this never happens again. As I looked around the table, I realized that sometimes getting fired is the best thing that can happen to your career. 5 years later, I founded my own consulting firm specializing in corporate ethics and whistleblower protection. Rose joined me as a partner, bringing her experience in internal compliance systems. We named our company Truth and Transparency Solutions. Our mission statement was simple: helping organizations build cultures where integrity thrives and truth tellers are protected. Our first major client was a government agency that wanted to overhaul their reporting systems after a series of safety scandals. The contract was worth $2.3 million. Brianna, now a vice president at her company, referred us to 3 major corporations looking to strengthen their ethics programs. "It's amazing how much the industry has changed," she said during one of our quarterly catch-up lunches. "Your story is taught in business ethics classes now." I smiled, thinking about how far we'd all come from that terrifying morning when security escorted me out of the building. Recently, I received a handwritten letter from a young accountant in Seattle. She discovered fraud at her company and was afraid to report it. "I read your story," she wrote. "It gave me the courage to document everything and contact a lawyer. I'm scared, but I know it's the right thing to do." I called her immediately. We talked for an hour about protection strategies, documentation methods, and the support systems available for whistleblowers. 2 months later, she successfully exposed a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. Her courage saved her company and protected the retirement funds of hundreds of employees. "I couldn't have done it without your example," she told me. "These conversations happen regularly now. People reach out from across the country, inspired by my story to stand up for what's right in their own organizations." Last week, I spoke at a conference for young professionals. After my presentation about ethical leadership, a woman in the audience raised her hand. "What would you say to someone who's afraid that speaking up will destroy their career?" I thought about that terrifying morning when Chris fired me in front of everyone, about the weeks of uncertainty and fear that followed, about the courage it took to press send on that evidence file. "I tell them that staying silent can destroy more than just your career," I said. "It can destroy your integrity, your self-respect, and potentially the lives of people who are counting on you to do the right thing." I paused, looking around the room full of eager faces. "And I tell them that sometimes getting fired for doing the right thing is the first step toward finding your true purpose." The applause was thunderous. This morning I opened my laptop to find an email that made me smile. It was from the current CEO of my old company, informing me that they were establishing the Leila Martinez Ethics Award for employees who demonstrate exceptional integrity. "Your courage didn't just change our company," the email read. "It changed our entire industry's approach to accountability and transparency." The award would include a $50,000 prize and full legal protection for recipients. More importantly, it would ensure that future employees wouldn't face the retaliation that I had experienced. I forwarded the email to my mother, who's now 78 and still my biggest supporter. She called within minutes. "Mija, I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice emotional. "You turned your pain into purpose." As I sat in my home office, looking at her photo on my desk, I realized she was right. Today marks exactly 7 years since Chris fired me in that conference room. 7 years since I walked out of that building carrying only my mother's photo and a broken heart. But what Chris didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted, was that firing me wouldn't silence me. It would unleash me. He forgot that I still had access to the truth. And the truth, once released, has a power that no amount of corporate politics can contain. My consulting firm now employs 47 people. We've helped expose fraud worth over $200 million across 15 companies. We've protected 342 whistleblowers and helped implement ethics programs that have changed hundreds of thousands of lives. Chris served his time and now works at a small accounting firm in another state. I don't think about him often anymore. My focus is on the future, not the past. But sometimes, when I'm mentoring a young professional who's afraid to speak up, I remember that terrifying moment when my world collapsed. And I tell them what I know now. He didn't fire me to silence me. He fired me to free me. And sometimes, the biggest professional disaster of your life is actually the beginning of your greatest success. The truth always wins. You just have to have the courage to set it free.